Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, friends. May I have your attention, please? My name is Paweł Rowiński. I am the president of ALEA, Federation of European Academy of Sciences, and together with a friend of Global Young Academy, with the NC, we are very happy to welcome you here. And thank you for joining us for this CoARA side event. From metrics to meaning, how reforming research assessment drives innovation, impact, and trust in science. It is a great pleasure to open this workshop and to set up the stage for what I hope will be an honest, ambitious, and forward-looking conversation. Let me begin with a simple truth. The way we assess research shapes the way research is done. It influences the questions we ask, the careers we build, and the cultures we create in our institutions. And today, in a research landscape that is more complex, more global, and more rapidly changing than even before, the traditional indicators of excellence are no longer for purpose. We all know that shortcomings of the current system. For too long, research assessment has relied heavily on publication counts, journal prestige, and rigid quantitative indicators. These measures have been treated as objective proxies for quality, when in fact they capture only a small slice of the true value of research. They privilege the visible over the valuable, the countable over the meaningful. This environment places enormous pressure on researchers. It encourages publish or perish behaviors, ruins creativity, and reinforces the idea that career advancement depends more on where one publishes than on what one contributes to knowledge or to society. At the same time, it concentrates far too much power in the hands of very few journal editors, ranking bodies, and gatekeepers whose decisions can determine whose work is amplified, whose careers progress, and which forms of science are viewed as worthy of funding. And we need something better. We need a system that recognizes the diversity of research outputs, from data sets to software to community engagement, one that rewards integrity, responsible research practices, and societal impact. One that allows researchers to pursue bold questions and creative methodologies without fear that doing so will damage their careers. And we need a system that actively fights against structural inequalities, a system that makes research cultures more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. The good news is that the reform movement is growing and it is gaining momentum. Initiatives such as CoARA, this is what we are meeting us at, the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment, and DORA, the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, have sparked a global wave of change. Today, more than 700 organizations, funders, universities, academies, professional societies have signed the agreement on reforming research assessment, published in 2022. Together, they have committed to a shared direction for reform. CoARA's 4 core commitments capture the essence of this shift, recognizing the full diversity of contributions to research, basing assessment primarily on qualitative evaluation with peer review at its core, no problem, abandoning the inappropriate use of quantitative metrics, and avoiding rankings in research assessment altogether. These principles represent a profound cultural change. They move us from metrics to meaning, from narrow indicators to a broader understanding of excellence. Today, I feel that I am, let's say, in two hats. One as the director of the Institute of Geophysics of Polish Academy of Sciences, where I can see the flaws of our assessment systems every day, and another is as the president of ALEA. At ALEA, the European Federation of Academies of Sciences and Humanities, we take this responsibility seriously. We signed the agreement in 2022, and we have been clear that academies themselves must also evolve. Election to an academy is a significant career milestone. It must be assessed through transparent, fair, and integrity-based procedures that align with the principles of reform and with the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity. If academies expect others to reform, we must lead by example. But as we reflect on the European momentum, we must also remember that research is a global endeavor. Knowledge does not stop at borders, and neither should reform. If we want healthier research cultures, if we want systems that are inclusive, trustworthy, and genuinely excellent, then we need buy-informed partners around the world. Reforming research assessment cannot be a European project alone. It must be a global movement. And so this is why today's workshop matters. It brings together voices from different sectors, different countries, and different stages of the research ecosystem. It is an opportunity to share experiences, to identify barriers, and to explore what meaningful and actionable reform looks like in practice. So as we begin, I invite you to think boldly, to challenge assumptions, to imagine what research culture could look like if we aligned our assessment practices with the values we claim to uphold: creativity, integrity, diversity, collaboration, societal relevance. Thank you once again for being here. I look forward to these conversations ahead and to the collective work of turning principles into meaningful, lasting change. And please, Yancy, now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pavel.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for being here as well. I'm Yancy Flores Bueso. I'm co-chair of the Global Young Academy, but I'm a postdoctoral researcher working in computational protein design, which means using AI to generate new proteins for solutions in health and environment. Alongside, I engage in actions of this, and I was in the steering board of the first steering board of the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment, and I work now in the International Science Council Forum on Publishing and Research Assessment. And now I'm going to introduce our fabulous speakers, and we're going to start with Dr. Giovanna Lima. Please welcome Dr. Giovanna Lima, Program Manager for the Declaration on Research Assessment, DORA, welcome Giovanna, a vital global initiative for reforming research assessment practices. Giovanna is leader in this space, having served as Senior Project Manager Officer for the Secretariat Impact of Erasmus University, Rotterdam, and the first Research Impact Officer at Trinity College, Dublin, where she developed the widely recognized Research Impact Framework. Welcome, Giovanna. Now we're going to welcome Dr. Matthijs Vleugel. Matthijs, and I'm sorry if I'm misspelling it again, is head of the Helmholtz, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, Open Science Office. Matthijs leads efforts to support Helmholtz Association and the wider community in fostering a cultural change towards open science. He holds a PhD in biophysics and cell biology, which brings a deep scientific background to his open scholarship. And he also is a figure of international, currently serving as the chair of the German national chapter of the CoARA. Welcome. Now I'm going to call Dr. Karina Geldhauser. Karina is a senior scientist at ETH Zurich, Department of Mathematics, and a member of the executive committee of the Global Young Academy. Her respected research focuses on foundational mathematics models for phenomena in physics and biology, alongside cross-disciplinary work in machine learning. Her expertise has earned her global recognition, including in several fellowships, and she also applies her skills in real-world challenges like the CO2 monitoring and reliable AI. Welcome, Karina. Lastly, we welcome Dr. Natalia Manola. Please welcome. She is CEO of OpenAIR, a European non-for-profit infrastructure that supports open scholarship communication and responsible research assessment. Natalia is a key figure in the European Open Science and EOSOC strategies, and she is currently co-chair of the CoARA working group on open infrastructures and responsible research assessment. And with that, thank you for doing that, I forgot. We are now going to open our conversation. I will call Dr. Giovanna Lima to give her presentation. Do you want to come here or there? Okay, yeah. I need to. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's see if technology is on Earth today. Yes, it is. Thank you so much for the invite to be here, and thank you, everyone. I'm program manager for DORA, the Declaration on Research Assessment, and I'll speak a little bit about what we mean by responsible research assessment, and then a little bit of what we do. It's, as Paolo introduced us, the reform movement is about making assessment more robust, more actionable, and more broadening the types of skills and outputs that we have in research assessment. And research assessment sometimes feels like it is something that happens very far away, but we like to bring out the message that actually assessment is happening in the everyday choices of researchers when they're sitting in committees, when they're peer reviewing papers, when they're supervising their students. So research assessment is not a policy that sits separate from the regular everyday activities of researchers. So what we mean by responsible research assessment, so we are in this movement towards approaches that incentivize, reflect, and reward high quality research. So it's about high quality research and abandoning practices that focus on proxy metrics that are not actually representing quality. So we want to move away beyond some of the metrics that we know are biased, that we know have limitations, such as the journal impact factor and the H-index. So these are some metrics that are used today to evaluate researchers that are not representative of the quality and impact of the research. And so the goal of the movement is, as Paolo just introduced us, to advance a holistic view of researchers. So our mission, as we are a global organization that's working across all scholarly disciplines worldwide with everyone in the system. So what I mean by that? So we mean that we work with research funding organizations, research performing organizations, publishers, metrics providers, because we need everyone to do something different. We need the research performing organizations to hire and promote different colleagues with different skills. We need the research funders to change the practices on assessing both proposals, but also past projects. We need the publishers to rely less on the journal impact factor. We need them to develop article level metrics. We need metrics providers to be transparent in how they create those metrics. So there is something to be done by everyone in this room to advance responsible research assessment. So, and that's what we do every day. So we are in this evolution to redefine impact. It's not about abandoning citations, although we do need to think about them with AI and paper mills and all of that. So we will need to be careful with citations moving forward, particularly. But it's about broadening the scope of what gets recognized as impact. It's also then about making contributions visible. So as Paul just introduced us, there's a lot of things that are done for the sake of science and for the benefit of science that are not today recognized and rewarded. So it's a movement towards making, not doing more, but actually recognizing what's already done. A classic one is peer review. Everyone is peer reviewing, but it's not recognized or rewarded in any of the systems, in most of the systems of assessment that we have. And then finally, and this one is good for the open science scholars, is particularly talking about the diversity of outputs. And here we have a nice graphic talking about the different scholarly outputs that are connected with open data. So for instance, we have protocols, methods, software. These are all types of outputs that are today mostly not recognized in assessment. So that's what we do. We are trying to advance diverse and inclusive research cultures. We see that assessment is an enabler for societal impact, for open science, for societal impact, because we need to change who is in the room, what gets recognized, like Paulo just introduced us. So we are in the, we enable equity, diversity, inclusion for allowing for hybrid careers, for acknowledging context, relying less on bibliometrics that are skewed towards some languages in some countries. We know that local languages are less represented because they're skewed towards English, for instance. So that's the sort of thing that assessment can help us do. Assessment can help us have quality research that is societally relevant, recognized and rewarded. And this is something that's needed everywhere. So just to wrap us up, in terms of practical things that have changed nowadays already, and that you may have seen in front of you already, the narrative CV is one of the tools that we have identified as something that allows for people to talk about their contributions in a way that are connected to, the strategic objectives of different institutions and of researchers. So that's the sort of change on the ground that is already happening. And then finally, we have some tools as well from DORA to help you debias the system. So in the left-hand side, and these are available on our website, on the left-hand side, we have the common biases in the system. So the halo effect or the Matthew effect. So we try to make them visible so we can fight the biases. And then also on debiasing the composition of committees. So we try to incentivize that when you're thinking of your committees, perhaps having early career researchers join, perhaps having minoritized groups joining the committee will bring new perspectives. So just as I said, it may sound overwhelming sometimes with research assessment, but there's different things we can do. As I hope that you leave the room today and perhaps you'll sign DORA. You can sign DORA as an individual. You don't have to be an institution to sign DORA. So every individual in this room can sign DORA. And then make different everyday choices when you are supervising your students, when you are discussing what value is in science, when you're communicating. And then if you've done something in this space and you want to share with the world, we'd be very happy to.
Thank you, Giovanna.
Thank you so much.
I think now it's time for Matthias to add something.
Can you?
So good morning also from my side, and very warm thank you also to the organizers for having me on this exciting panel. So my name is Matthias Vleugel. I'm the head of the Open Science Office at the Helmholtz Association, and I'm also the chair of the national chapter of CoARA in Germany. For those of you who do not know the Helmholtz Association, we are Germany's largest research performing organization with over 45,000 employees. And we mostly perform research in long-term large projects. So we operate large infrastructures like particle accelerators, satellite systems, research ships, etc. So big research projects over multiple years that need a certain capacity. The Helmholtz Association consists of 18 legally independent research organizations spread all out over Germany. And the Helmholtz Open Science Office is an overarching entity that accompanies these research association organizations in their transitions towards open science. We do this along a number of focus areas, and we've defined these for the year as open science publishing, of course, the traditional papers, but also software and data publications, the infrastructures that are needed for that. Responsible research, which for us includes, of course, research integrity, but also things like research security. And of course, the topic of today, providing the right incentives in the form of research assessment. So instead of imposing a reform on research assessment on our researchers, we decided to take a bottom-up approach. So we started by asking our researchers what is important to them. We did this with a very, very simple survey in which we basically asked two questions. The first one being, which of the following criteria do you believe are currently being used to assess your performance? And the second question being, which of the following criteria do you believe should be used to assess your value of performance? And this then in the context of promotions, permanent positions, etc. We took a published list of criteria, which is probably known to some of the people here on the stage as well, but we adapted it a little bit to make it fit to our organization. In addition, we collected information on the career stage of the people that answered their research areas. So Helmholtz focuses on 6 strategic research areas and the name of one of their 18 institutes. So this is what we got. So on the left side of the screen, you can see the answer to the question, which of the criteria do you believe are currently being used? I don't think we see a lot of big surprises here. So we got over 1,000 responses from our researchers, but I think there's lots of familiar criteria here. So the highest ranked is that people think they're being assessed by the number of publications, funding they require, authorship order, position, our beloved impact factor, and quite a number actually of publication-based metrics. Now, the interesting part starts when we look on the right. So which criteria do people think they should be assessed by? And now we see a very different list. So the number one criteria we see there is collaborations, but also supervision, ethics and integrity, and things like contributions to a healthy institutional culture. So these are very, very different criteria. The data that we collected allowed us to also split this based on career states, also based on disciplines. I will not show the data for disciplines. Of course, we see some interesting differences there as well. I'll just show the data here for the different generations. So leading researchers here are group leaders, PIs. I think the list looks very similar to the one I showed before. So this is only showing which criteria do you think should be used. So what are your important contributions to science, basically? We see, again, lots of publication-based criteria, but also their funding and collaborations are important. But importantly, for the publications, we now see non-metric quality, which didn't show up in the previous list. But also still number of publications, is there a number of citations, etc. Now, when we look at the right side of the screen and we ask the same question to early career researchers, we again see this very different list. So collaborations, ethics and integrity, professional development, communication outreach, a very, very different list of criteria. So the question, of course, here is, do we see a generational shift here? Does the new generation of researchers really find these criteria more important than the others? Or what would maybe be the worrying scenario? Are we selecting out the researchers that value these more traditional criteria? I think the important thing to notice here is that if I look at this list, then I would say the list on the right, these are the criteria that are needed to drive excellent and high quality science. And this is exactly the kind of qualities that we need in researchers. So how do we continue? So we start at the bottom of this pyramid. We collected the priorities for researchers, but of course this is not enough. So what we are doing next is we're talking to the HR departments of these 18 different research centers, see what the formal criteria are, see if we can modernize that, update that to reflect what we find in these surveys. But also, of course, this doesn't stand on its own. So we go one level higher as well. Our centers are being evaluated every year and every 7 years. So what are the KPIs being used there? And how can we tweak these KPIs maybe to provide the incentives that we want to have all the way down this chain? Of course, we're not going to reinvent the wheel, so we're very grateful for organizations like DORA, who have collected lots of good practices, CoARA working groups that are developing and collecting lots of good practices. And thereby we hope to assemble like a new structure on how we can actually value the criteria that we think matter to our researchers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthijs. Now we have Karina. Thank you, Karina.
Yeah, thanks for setting up this interesting panel. I'm here to report on the perspective of research funding organizations. And I do this as a member of the CoARA working group on reforming research assessment in the light of the funders. I will be discussing here some ideas, principally of research funding organizations on the commitment that we made to reform research assessments, in particular on recognizing the diversity of contributions, to base the evaluation of research on qualitative evaluations, on peer review, and to have a very limited and responsible use of metrics, and to abandon the inappropriate use of journal-based metrics. Where do we stand? So in the end, a lot of the things that Matthijs has been pointed out as being desired is something that currently funding organizations are already taking into account. So when we surveyed research funding organizations on what do they actually mean by research quality, it is true that a lot of them didn't have a concrete mathematical definition, which for me as a mathematician is very sad, but yet they did have reasonable proxies to define what they mean by good research. You can say that there is still a bit of an issue on this, because you may also go backwards. You can reward future funding based on the ex post outcome of high quality research. You don't have to always go on projections. But nevertheless, when we look at what is said here, actually the methodological proposal ranked very high. The originality of the question, so the basis on the proposal rather than the person who brought forward this proposal, is already done. Yet, when we see as the least often mentioned aspects is, for example, interdisciplinarity, its adherence to open science principles, it's the existence of a data management plan. There's a lot of things that are not so much taken into account at the moment that we might want to be working on. When we are talking about what can we do to make sure that qualitative review is being laid out well, the first thing is to do demand management, to be sure that we are asking for the right proposals. If you're just asking for a very narrow scope, you'll also only get a narrow scope. If we, in the beginning, incentivize open science practices, it's much more likely that we will be able to achieve them. It's very important to make sure that you have a diverse pool of reviewers and to actually coach them on the criteria that is important for you to be assessed in. There has been attempts by research funding organizations, for example, also to fund childcare time that is extra needed if a person with caring responsibilities wants to be or is voluntarily taking part of a panel, is serving as a reviewer, just to make sure that also those voices which might rather more easily be forgotten might be heard. Let me mention maybe some interesting ideas on how to counter the so-called mainstream bias. By mainstream bias, we mean that if you are from a very visible, very perceivedly leading institution, then you're more likely to be funded, because people more believe you that you will be able to carry out the project that you propose to do. In order to counter this, what you could do is, for example, to not have a quantitative score from 1 to 10 on the fit of the researcher to the proposal, but just to say, make it binary. So by saying like, is it sufficient? The environment, the objects that are already in the lab, like the qualification of the investigator, not to rank this like as super excellent, excellent, and okay, but just to say, is it sufficient for the proposal, yes or no? In this way, you take already away quite a lot of the biases towards a very visible institution. You could also just use a double-blind review. It might be more feasible for some disciplines than for others. We already heard a lot about narrative CVs. It is a space to allow for a broader variety of outputs and career trajectories. But maybe let us look a bit deeper on what we could do when we are coming to the funding decision. So we all know that like maybe the best proposals are easy to stand out, but what about all the others? Interestingly, there has been experiments with lottery procedures around the cutoff line. And it seems to be in retrospect, like 5 years later, that the outcome of those research projects that were selected by lottery were not of any type worse than those which were selected without the lottery. So it's a point to think about. Another point, very important, is to maybe let the reviewers talk to each other, as then you develop a scientific discussion and a more in-depth review that adheres more to the qualitative aspects than maybe on the mere indicators only. And with this, I pass on.
Okay, good morning. I'm Natalia Manola, and I'm here representing OpenAir, which is an open scholarly communication infrastructure. And what I will be talking today is not about the assessment, but how open infrastructures support the transformation towards these new types of assessments. And I just want to make a statement beforehand, is that we all know how much money we are investing in open science and open scholarly communication. Think about your universities, repositories, open access journals, CRIS systems at the national level and at the European level. And I can say, for example, that Europe is spending about 1.4 billion in the European Open Science Cloud, where we are recording, if you want, everything. And then we are using the proprietary databases with the publications and citations to do these, the thing. So what we claim is that this needs to change, and this is what I'm going to be talking about. And then I'm going to be talking a lot about innovation, because innovation in science is happening, but in research assessment is not happening. And what we claim is that it can happen with open infrastructures. And why? Because, as Giovanna said, it's the AI-driven digital big science and intensive science that we're moving. It's a global, so we are talking about a complex workflow environment. We're talking about interdisciplinary challenges that researchers from around the world that they need to get together. And so it's a fact that science the way we're doing science has changed, but research assessment has not changed. And this is not good. So why do we talk about this innovativeness in research assessment? Is because the idea is now with how it's going is that we need researchers to take risks. We need them to collaborate openly, and we need them to be assessed fairly. So taking risk is something that should be somehow counted for. Then the traditional research assessment systems, we based on citation, so it's about predictable outcomes mainly, and not about unconventional research paths. And then we need infrastructures that would allow experimentation, diversity, and the recognized value beyond metrics. And this is a very loaded sentence, but let's think about each of these things. So the open infrastructures, we know that they exist, but how can we turn them to be trusted collaborators for research assessment? So it's not just support system, But what we, the open infrastructures, now the way we are building it, because we are building them and involving them, is about we can shape, how science gets recognized, rewarded, and reproduced. And I will give you an example at the end. Now, just to go over a few things is that, they are built for change and not lock in, because, this is something that we need to work on. It's open standards, modular, community driven. The second one that you're not able to see is about connected, fragmented information. If we want to go beyond publications, if we want to go data, software, and practices of researchers, we need to get them from many sources around the world. And if we're talking about global, so open infrastructures being modular, having actors, service providers talk to each other around the world, we can do that. Then we embed experimentation into the system, because when we do the open infrastructures and we're publicly funded, we have, I would say, the luxury is to go beyond, to try out new things, how things are being assessed, how we collect the data, and so forth. Scale works and discard what doesn't work. So we have, again, this luxury. But then one of the key things is that, that infrastructures, innovation and synergies, that they can bring it together. So for us, the only way forward in order to support these transitions and changes is by using open infrastructures. So what makes an open infrastructure innovative, I will just repeat, is just open standards and interoperability, transparency and sustainability, modularity and extensibility, community governance. This is very important, because the community at any point in time comes and says, let's try this, let's do this. And then is the AI readiness and fairness, because the AI readiness and the fairness means is that we're not working under closed silos. We are just having everything out in the open. So this is something that we need to move, to the future. Now, how, if you think about, okay, those are the characteristics of the open infrastructures, but how do they support it? So sheet from outputs to contributions. The idea here is that open infrastructures, we're not just, and I will give you the example, we're not just capturing publications, data, and citations, but we are, for example, capturing practices, open science practice, responsible science practices. We are doing that. Open up the recognition system is that, the non-traditional actors, the languages, the emerging domains, they gain visibility, where if you have a Web of Science or a Scopus, you know what you can get. To enable AI-powered discovery, machine actionable, provenance-rich data. So at any point in time, when you get a metric, an indicator, you know where it's coming from. And this is super important for the scientometrics people, so they can have the full path of knowledge. And then, of course, it's the reward of innovation itself, because we're not just getting the publications, we are getting, the prizes. There are so many sources out there, especially with the universities, that we can combine together. In the working group of CoARA that I co-chaired, we have these two documents. I invite you, they're going to be at the end. The idea is that what we want to say there is that, first of all, investments at universities happen in open infrastructures. Let's take advantage of them and connect them globally, and have an open system that will support the research assessment. But mainly is that what we want to do is that the open infrastructures, they cannot follow the example of the old closed infrastructures, that they were limited, that they provided the rules. The community needs to provide the rules, and we have a checklist on how to select these infrastructures. And finishing, I want to give you an example of what we do in open air. Is, for example, we have the open air graph, which is a global from global sources. You can find there, more than 200 million publications. I'm not gonna go about the numbers. The red stuff is that, the data sources, the data, the publications, the citations, everything is what you know of. Now, the blue and the other color stuff is what we are moving forward, because in a data-intensive science, we want to say this publication was linked to this data, that use these facilities, that use these instruments and so forth. So what we need to do is to give credit even to the people who run the facilities. And this is important in this research and innovation world. And then the other thing that what we're doing, as I said, about experimentation is having the graph now. We are experimenting and we're giving to institutions a new service. We call it My Research Folio, that they can come and use the open-air graph plus ORCID plus narrative CVs and start building, these to experiment in these new types of CVs. It's not just the narrative CV, it's not just the indicators, but it's a mix. So where they can, hands-on try to see what works and what doesn't work for them.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Okay. Can I have the pointer, please? Thank you. So we will now move on to our discussion of the panel. And I want Pavel to start with a question to the panel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was so much food for thought that you were giving us. Natalia, you mentioned that a lot of innovation is happening in science, not that much in research assessment, although everything what you have said is very innovative. So that's a really question. But I have a question to, I don't know, to all of you. What do you think? What kind of cultural and changes in terms of organization within academia is needed to make this reform? We are talking about the reform, that this reform will be kind of sustainable, not just symbolic, because we can easily make a reform only a symbolic one. So I don't know.
I mean,
Would like to.
I can start with the infrastructure, because I will let Giovanna and the others talk about, what is happening. But I believe that universities now, they are, as I said, they are investing a lot in infrastructure. Okay. So what is missing from their point of thinking is that this infrastructure, it captures the processes and the results of, and it's keeping the institutional memory of the university. But what they're missing, and maybe because it's different teams within the university, is that they can use the same infrastructure in getting this assessment and the new assessment forms in place. So the change, it's not, the cultural change is you need to support it a bit. And if you have good digital infrastructure in place, you can push it and promote it. That's what I would say from my point of view. So it's not just cultural change, but assisted cultural change.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Do you have, Farina?
From the individual researcher's point of view, I would say it's really a change in mindset. If I remember when I was little, in every train, there was a smoker's compartment and a non-smoker's compartment. And it seems that there was a right to smoke wherever you want to smoke. Now, this is completely unthinkable, at least in Europe. And in the same way, I would say, like, if we go away from the mindset, like to
Awesome. Oh, it's back. Matthijs. No? I think that you have to turn it on.
Works already. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Good. It's So I think already Natalia mentioned it. I think we have to be courageous, and I think we have to take risks. So I've shown you in the survey that we did that there is a lot of interest among the research community, especially the younger researchers, to change things. This is a bottom-up initiative. I think these will only work, of course, when we also have support from higher leadership in the organizations. These two things need to come together. And then indeed we need to start experimenting. We shouldn't wait for each other for a perfect solution. I have the feeling this is happening a lot. We're very hesitant to change things because we think there might be downsides of new methods. We shouldn't forget that the current methods also have huge downsides already. So I think if we start to change, experiment with this, I think we're already making important steps. We should share this information with each other. We should learn from these experiments and just implement what's working best for our organization. So I think a bit of courage and also just get the researcher feeling inside of us, get it out and try to see try to experiment with these new methods.
It's hard to be the fourth one to speak because they all had the best ideas. Perhaps I'll try to bring it home to every one of us in the room in terms of having the courage of and connecting with people and in the change of mindsets, having the investment. It's not easy. So having courage in the higher education sector is not easy. Experimenting is not easy. And changing people's minds is also not easy. So perhaps we need to accept and acknowledge how hard it is and accept that it's going to take time. And so perhaps my main idea for this question is resilience. It's changing the mindsets of everyone in the room, because it's not a policy change, right? So we see funders, so for instance, you go for a panel and you're not allowed to use the journal impact factor anymore to review a proposal. But then the reviewers go online and look for it because they are so used to using it. So even when the policy changes, people's minds haven't changed. So that's where we need all the elements to come together, which it's not easy. So what I'm trying to say is the organizations will need to sustain for a while the transition. And that's where we are now. We are in this transition, and early career researchers, I think that's an important cohort of people that are being impacted right now by the transition. Many of early career researchers are benefiting from it, but also many are perhaps lost sometimes in the change. So perhaps having resilience is my main suggestion for this question.
Thank you, Giovanna.
But can you just add, you mentioned cultural changes, also kind of administrative changes. Is it also kind of a generational change? So I know that one of you touched upon this, and since we have a difference in generations here, so I'm just wondering about this.
I'm hoping it's a general generational change. So we indeed see these big differences. I would say maybe generally in society, we also see that the young generation is very societally aware, very politically aware. I think we see the same thing with young scientists. And I think this drive to make real impact, to influence people's lives, to be a good researcher, I think we need to foster these qualities, and we need to make sure in any case that we keep these people in the system and that they keep this drive to make science a better place.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the leadership that's many of the old standing institutions, let's say, are leading the way. So when we hear of Sorbonne leaving the rankings or Utrecht changing their assessments. So we see that the leadership in these organizations are not necessarily young. So we are seeing the courage and the experimentation even today. So I want to say that, I want to reply that yes, and we can already change. And I would say it's the leadership in the room here can do a lot. So I would not wait for the generational change, perhaps.
Thank you for this. Jens,
Thank
please.
you. So I am wondering, about how research assessment and the reform could contribute to strengthen public trust in science. And I wonder if you have any ideas on this topic. Who wants to? Anyone wants to? Yes,
Perhaps I can kick us off. And when I use that image of research assessment being a lever for many things, it's a lever for open science, it's a lever for societal impact. Because if we're not recognizing and rewarding societal impact, then the odds that our people will do those practices and invest time in, instead of publishing another paper, connecting with their local communities, then that means that research assessment can play a role in incentivizing societal impact and society relevant knowledge. I think there is a second point that we are then having different careers. I think your point that we are selecting out people that are connected with society, because today transdisciplinarity is very risky. Being an interdisciplinary researcher is very risky today. So that means that we are selecting out these people that would make the connections with society. So having those connections with society and being transparent and are things that research assessment can enable us to do. And then finally, the hybridity of careers is something that I feel can also encourage trust in science, that researchers are not these people that are in the ivory tower, that we don't know them and we don't understand what they do. Actually, that they can move towards society, industry and public sector. And you've seen researchers in your life because there's many types of researchers. Today, we have a narrow type of what a researcher looks like. And perhaps that we can also then have more trust in society when there's more of us everywhere.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, Matthias.
Yeah, so maybe to start with, from my perspective, trust in science, I think the main threats to trust in science do not necessarily come from within the science system at the moment. So I think in order to improve trust in science, first of all, we need to invest in science education in all levels to improve understanding of the scientific method. And the second biggest threat, I would say, is politicization of science. I think these are the two big threats for science. We generally see that trust in science is very high still in Europe, I think also globally. What we can do, of course, as researcher is make sure that we are as trustworthy as possible. And I think the list, again, that I showed of criteria that are valued by our researchers, I think these are exactly the things that we should support for that. So things that were on this list were ethics and integrity, collaboration, communication and outreach, supporting a healthy institutional culture. I think by doing all of these things, I think we build a system of science that is as trustworthy as we can. And I think that is probably where our role as the scientific community also ends.
Wonderful. Thank you. Do you have something, Karina, or?
I'm sorry, it's my usual ceterum censeo of the fundamental scientists, that we should think about impact, not only about innovation, about new technologies, but it is really about all disciplines. It's new ways of preserving cultural heritage. It's new ways to preserve our culture, our language, our literature into the next generation. Like impact shouldn't be thought narrowly as just as the next vaccine or the latest technology. I think that's what I want to say.
Completely agree.
I think, I just want to touch on what Giovanna said, is that, first of all, is that researchers, they need to get out of this silo that they have built, in academia. And, this is open science, this is interdisciplinary and so forth. But then one of the keys that is here is, and the bets is, will this new research assessment promote the skills? Because everyone is talking about the skills, and now with AI, it's skilling. In all professions, it's about skilling. And we're talking about skills on leadership, on management, on science communication, all of that. So the question that I would say, and we need to address in the future, is that this new research assessment is able to get them out of their academic silos first and to build the skills. That's, if we get that, I think you're going to have by design the trust in science.
Thank you very much. Just to follow up with your points, which are super essential, and I want to support your points, but saying that trust in science matters and research assessment matters for trust in science, because large surveys have shown that there is some perceived elitism in society, and there can be a lack of communication fields, a perceived lack of communication skills from scientists, which can fuel antagonist and populist narratives. And it also, any fraudulent or irrelevant research increases or weakens credibility, And declining trust in science can be exploited to undermine any democratic institutions. So in addition to that, science needs to serve society and help society to meet all the societal challenges, especially in so many challenges that we have today. And we need to provide independent evidence. So when we prioritize credit maximization over truth maximization, this makes the evidence less reliable. And weakened science systems are easier for illiberal populists to influence and control. And this is very well known and very well studied, and there's a lot of references in the bottom that you can read to get this on. Now, if we just go and move and check out, for example, how the state of a democracy of a country versus academic freedom, which dictates the strength of the academy, correlates, you see that there's a striking picture. And when you go actually and see the data and do the data correlation, you will see that the correlation between that is about 0.89. It's extremely strong correlation. So this tells us, that science is one of the democracy's strongest pillars, and we need it to preserve democracy. And one case example that we can see is Argentina in its science system, which is currently under a lot of attack and being defunded by an ultra-right president. And recently, Argentinian researchers led an expedition to the deep sea, and they found many new species. And this raised a lot of, spirits of the population of the country and citizens, and they felt proud about it. But this didn't stop here. It became viral in social networks, so much that over 1 million tweets were done, or whatever notes were done every day. And this stopped the president from getting more initiatives to defund more the research systems for months. So this is when society sees the value of science. And this is not something that is going to solve their everyday problems, but it's something that they feel proud of. So this is a prime example, in my perspective, of how when we communicate and engage with society, science strengthens and democracy may strengthen. We should open the conversation with the audience. I welcome any questions, please. Can we have microphones, please, in the floor?
Thank you very much. Chiwike Odenigwe from GYA and African Academy of Sciences. Thank you very much for this very important conversation. You presented a chart showing how researchers perceive research impact assessment, but also you talked about societal response, which is very interesting to see. I want to bring the two together and ask, how does what matters in different regions of the world influence how knowledge users perceive a research impact assessment? Because in the end, this is scientists deciding how they should be assessed, which is good, but then introduces some sort of bias because we are seeing it from our way. But then there are knowledge users who are there and maybe they haven't been consulted. How do they think about research impact assessment? And is it also different in different regions of the world, global north versus global south? Because what is important here is not necessarily important there. And also in different sectors, industry versus government versus academia. So how do you see all these affect the way forward?
Matthijs, yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think the first response to this is that we should do this survey in a much larger scale. So indeed also go beyond our research organizations, make it global, also ask the knowledge users what they find important. I have to admit that lots of these criteria that are described, of course, in our survey, like impact, collaboration, etc., these are terms that are very broad and very vague. And I can imagine they mean very different things when you ask different sectors, different disciplines, and in different countries. So that definitely doesn't mean that if impact is found the most important for researchers in different countries, that this will have the same definition. And I think this will also, of course, have a direct interplay with the knowledge users. We don't have data on this, but I strongly suspect that these differences will be there. I think we have to figure this out and also really define together with society at large what we exactly mean by these kind of criteria. And then, of course, the next step, how can we properly assess those? So that's still a big task ahead, but yes, it's a very important point.
Giovanna? Thank you, Matthijs.
Thank you for the question. To reinforce Matthijs' points, perhaps, indeed, that's one of the most important points of research assessment. It needs to be responsible and adaptable to context. And context, and this is where we see that diversifying assessment as much as possible and alignment as much as possible as well is important, because science is global and researchers are mobile. And at the same time, we need to align with the local priorities of different places. So that's why we are moving towards more qualitative assessment, because it allows for context much more than quantitative measures would allow for. And then in terms of what we see in impact assessment is the importance of being quite careful in the level of assessment. Are we, perhaps the individual level of assessment is not the best one, because of the nature of impact. Impact takes a long time, needs a lot of investment. So we see that impact assessment is one of the, let's say, along with how do we assess team science, it's one of the frontiers. How do we assess societal impact? Because societal impact is on the eye of the beholder. It takes, it can be negative as well. I can view it's positive and you can view it's negative. So it's a very complex issue. But we see that this is one of the main institutional alignment problems we have today. Our institutions want research that's relevant and societally impactful, but we don't assess for it. So this is indeed what we need to change the most. What we see, DORA being in a global organization, we have in our steering committee colleagues from India, from China, from Latin America. We see that the different places will indeed put different emphasis on different things. And in the case of Latin America, for example, on Thursday, there will be the launch of a manifesto for the right of science, and that science needs to be democratic and things like that. So we see the emphasis much more there on the connection with democracy that we don't necessarily see in other parts of the globe. So that's so assessment needs to be context driven and values driven, and the values will differ in each of the contexts.
Yes, completely agree with that. Do you have any more? Just to finalize, there was a large study actually done with a lot of peers on GYA on research assessment, and it was found in this study that indeed what influence more what is assessed in an institution or in a policy is where that policy lives, where in the world that policy is. So the social context influences a lot assessment, despite all institutions having a strong emphasis on metrics overall, in general. And we want to have more questions, yes?
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. I'm Babalola, and I can identify with Nigeria Academy of Science, TWAS, OWS, the Africa Academy of Science, and ISC. I have So Giovanni, thank you for the good work Dora is doing. And I saw recently you put out something on the internet calling for expert, which I did apply for. But I'm baffled by certain things. Looking at what all of you have said, and just let me pick on that from Open Science in terms of funding and criteria for hiring and promotion is a big problem when you are talking about research assessments, because the foundation you want to build it upon, even that foundation itself is not stable. Think, for example, hiring and promotion. I'm based in South Africa. Hiring and promotion is not even the same for professor from University A to University B. Now you want to base research assessments on hiring and promotion. That itself is not a stable platform. And I was caught aback to see in terms of funding what the established researchers rated and in comparison to what the early career researchers have rated for funding. So you will see, how do you want to strike the balance in research assessment? Will you use a different scale for early career scientists and a different scale for established scientists? That will not be. We need to have a standard. And this thing has been something so painful in my heart as a research director, because myself, I go to meetings, we start talking. It's not about H index. It's not about the number of citation, but we don't have the standard to use. We don't have something that we can say that University A and University B or country A and country B should use. So, but I so much appreciate the good work you have done, the in-depth of your findings, and I feel like holding everything on and as if today is not enough to sieve everything and fish out what we want. I want to ask Natalie from Open Air. I don't know what you mean by collaborate openly. I know collaboration, but when you say collaborate openly, pardon my ignorance. If you can shed light on that, thank you.
Who is going up? You.
Thank you for the nice comments and questions. Indeed, the standards you asked for, we see that they need to be developed by the different disciplines, and this is an important role for the disciplinary societies and academies, and then also nationally. So what you described is exactly where we are now, that we are convinced, okay, we know this needs to be done, but how do we do it? So the question is right now on the how. I don't think that institutions like DORA will be able to produce the standards, but we are very happy for when the standards are there to give visibility and to share and connect, because that's the role we can see for DORA, connecting the different countries and connecting the different disciplines. But the standards, which is, I agree with you, are now missing. We were for a long time saying what not to do, but not what to do instead. It's the next frontier, but we need all the economic schools to decide what is quality and impact in economics or in law or in medicine, because it will be quite different. Karina mentioned cultural heritage preservation, for instance. There will be things in cultural heritage preservation that will make no sense whatsoever in economics, for example, and there will be overlaps. So I think right now we are in this discussion, can we set a core that is transversable to all disciplines and transversable to the world? And if we can, what does it look like? So that's exactly the question we're grappling right now. Natalia.
Yes, I think, one of the things that I would like to challenge is in what you said. I think it's the wording. I don't think we should have standards, because the assessment has to do with the objective of the institution hiring or, or whatever. So objectives are different per institution, per country, per discipline, and within a discipline and an institution, it may change over time. So what I would just say, it's not about standards, it's about good practices and guidance. So when you want to do this, How do you do that? That's the only thing that I would just add to what you say.
Yeah, so I think we should go for further questions, please. So, can we have a microphone?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Gianfranco Pacchioni from the Accademia dei Lincei and the EAP board. So, very interesting discussion. And there is one aspect, I think, which has not entered into the discussion today, which is very important, which is time. Is a variable which is fundamental because, of course, evaluating a narrative CV takes more time than evaluating metrics. And this is why people are using metrics, not because we are perverse, because we have no time. And so time is an important variable that we have to introduce into this discussion. And in this respect, I like it very much, the point that was raised by you, because I've been serving in many evaluation panels, and most of the time is dedicated to put the line, to cut the line between funded and non-funded proposals. And we know very well that in this gray zone, proposals are basically all the same. So I think if you want this exercise to be sustainable and practical, we also have to propose practical solutions. And I think this is one that I would fully support. I mean, panels should dedicate their time to select the 5%, 10% best proposals, remove let's call them lousy proposals, which are less and less, and then extract by sort among the average proposals, which are very often with similar quality. And another point about time, social impact is very important, but it takes years to see the social impact. And young generation, young people don't have this time basically when they want to apply for new positions. So it's very difficult to evaluate. Another example, collaborations. Everybody's listing collaborations in the CVs, but to establish, are these collaborations real? Are they really producing an output? This also takes time. So this is a problem that we have to basically address. But this idea, I think, should be implemented.
So I think it combines time and cost probably together. So Matthias, you will take it, please.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think it's an important point. I have a couple of answers. I think there's many possible answers to this, so there will probably be follow-ups. I can say a couple of things about the time spent on peer review. I think first of all, we should make sure that this is not wasted time. And we can do this by also, again, putting peer review activities as part of the evaluation system. So when you are active as a researcher in peer review activities for funding organizations, for hiring promotion, this should count on your CV as well. This should be a task that's taken serious by the community and also supports you yourself in your career. The second point I wanted to make is that narrative CVs, they might sometimes seem like they make things more complicated. On the other hand, they also support peer reviewers a lot, in the sense that if you just get a list of publications and numbers, you as a peer reviewer have to basically make up your narrative yourself. How does it work together? Why is there a gap in this CV? How does these publications fit together? So we also see that these narrative CVs actually provide guidance for peer reviewers to make it much more understandable how these individual activities, outputs, and locations, collaborations, how this all fits together. So it can also be a big support for the peer reviewers. And the last point I wanted to make, in addition to the lottery, is maybe we should consider also evaluating less. We evaluate a lot. Every output needs to be evaluated. Every funding proposal is evaluated by 2, 3, 4 reviewers. Institutes are being evaluated every year, every couple of years. We evaluate a lot in research. So maybe if we talk about trust in science, maybe we should also work towards a science system that is trusted in such a way that we can evaluate less.
Anybody would like to add something to this?
Let me open the Pandora box in the end. Another thing that is done around the cutoff line is to use exactly this randomness for your diversity measures. So you might want to, around the cutoff line where you say, anyway, it's somewhat all equal. This is where you might place your diversity first principles for all what you want to say in positive or negative about it. It is, in some sense, a reasonable place to be, because you're recognizing the best proposals as truly excellent, and where you anyway have a leeway or a place of margin or a randomness you cannot control, this is where you might place like non-scientific evaluation criteria. Is a point to think about, a point to discuss maybe in the coffee break. I just wanted to add.
I just wanted to thank everyone for the panel. I think it's an important topic, and the treatment of it's very, very interesting. I think maybe what I'd like to do is ask you to focus in a little bit more on this issue of narrative CVs. I think that the key point that many of you touched on is that research practices are changing and research assessment is not. So there's a gap there. And it seems, I'm very interested in this turn toward narrative CVs because it's only kind of drifted into my radar lately. And I guess I'm wondering, are they seen as particularly good tools for bridging that particular gap? And one other question just to toss into the mix, could they have particular utility for researchers in small disciplines where making intelligible the norms and standards of a small discipline to those outside it turns out to be incredibly important? I guess I haven't been part of the conversation about the hopefulness of narrative CVs. So I'm wondering if you could maybe speak to the pros and cons of them, the values and the experience, because it's really only in just the last, 24 months, something like that, that I see them now being widely called for and used. Thank you.
So I believe there has been a very big discussion among the funders exactly about this point. I think the bottom line is that you anyway want to ensure that if you have a proposal that touches on more than one discipline, that you have all the views on the table, because otherwise the whole qualitative review is fraught. So the interdisciplinarity of a proposal is a big thing. Otherwise, if you're in a small discipline, it anyway is a matter of these standards of the discipline, which hopefully is somewhat like a common sense, and then peer review would still be the criteria to go. And especially in small disciplines where there might be a lot of variety, the key concept that was brought forward is to not to like have reviews being sent in and then like they stand as they are, but especially when they are conflicting. So one reviewer likes the proposal, the other one doesn't, to allow for a discussion, because this might raise the quality of the review, and the scientific discussion itself may give room for also unconventional ideas to counter that mainstream bias. But these are all in some ways side effects of information that you gather, not only from the narrative review, but also from it, and that are especially benefiting to a small discipline where just the variety is bigger.
Can I?
Do you want? Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to say that, as you said, the narrative CVs are, something new and evolving, and it would be really good for everyone to be involved, so you can shape it as thing. The idea that we bring from Open Air is that the narrative CVs is good to give a context, and I think I would agree with Matthias is that about time is that if you have the right context, then you can, expedite the time on how you're judging. What we would like to do is to say, to have all the metrics and indicators and outcomes, and, now using AI plus the researcher assistance is to link what is said in the narrative CV with the outputs and the indicators, because that would have, the best of two worlds. So how can we combine? So what we would like is to, to welcome all of you to shape with us how the narrative CVs and the digital infrastructures are being shaped.
So if I can summarize some of the pros and cons, because we can have a whole session about narrative CVs. Thank you for the question. In terms of pros, beyond allowing for diversity and context and let's say, recognition of different types of contributions, since we move away from having laundry list of publications, we also reduce the pressure for quantity, because the pressure for quantity is one of our biggest problems that we need to solve, right? The publish and perish culture that's leading to people cutting corners, it leads to a decreased well-being of researchers and all of that. So the reducing the quantity-driven approach is also one of the big pros of the narrative CV. Then I'll go for the cons. Of course, there are cons, especially as we are in the transition. Right now, there's a big diversity of formats. So the researchers are being overloaded with different types of narrative CVs from different funders, from their own institutions. So that's the sort of, can we align the formats? Is there a role for us to perhaps and that's where infrastructure comes in. Perhaps if in your ORCID you have all the elements you need for a narrative CV, and then for each of the narrative CVs you pick up what you need, perhaps that's somewhere we need to head to. The second problem is the transition. People don't know how to write a narrative CV and people don't know how to read a narrative CV. So we have problems on both sides of the equation. When I was working in the universities, we were spending a lot of time helping people write them, but then we weren't spending any time on how people read them and how do you assess qualitatively instead of relying on proxy metrics. That's where the frontier is right now, the reviewing side of narrative CVs. And that's where I think the responsibility of the funders and the institutions that are using it in training the reviewers, but then also producing rubrics. And because there is, and I think we discussed this in the pre-panel meeting, there is a perceived notion of quality being more subjective than quantity. And this is where we want to be quite sure that qualitative can have a rubric and have a transparent procedure, and perhaps even be more transparent than quantity, because we don't know how journals are indexed. We don't know how the GIF are being manipulated. So perhaps quality, we can do that. And the third last problem is on language and culture. There are, the narrative CV calls for people being quite upfront and saying, I did this, my team has achieved this. And there are cultures that are not made for that. There are cultures that are very collective based, that also gender, women don't like to talk about themselves so highly as well. So that's the sort of the issues we see is in how can we, in these cultures that are more collective based, because we see in the reviewing, so there are some studies coming out in that the reviewers like active language, they like language that is not conducive to some cultures and some languages. Thank you.
It seems we are coming to the end of the session. So it was a bit the discussion quantity against quality or other way around. And of course, you can see when you were describing the level of the democracy, you used numbers as well. So that's also quantities that you had to use. So we cannot forget these numbers as well at some level. We have mathematician here in the audience. So I guess you like numbers, and it's of course a matter for us to convince everybody that quantities are not less biased than qualities. So that's something that we really need to take into account. Thank you so much for such wonderful input, and I think very interesting discussion. And I think we can applaud the participants of the panel. Yeah, support this. Thank you very much.